Hail Satan and praise Dio. Welcome, welcome to the Masters of Unreality panel, Heavy Metal and Science Fiction. I'm Tricia Narwani. I'm the editorial director for Del Rey Books and the Queen of All Evil. And I am very pleased to be joined by these very fine metal gentlemen. We'll start by introducing themselves and talking a little bit about their lives in metal.
Hey folks, I am Michael R. Fletcher, author of Beyond Redemption. My background in metal, I played guitar in a goth metal band called Sex Without Souls for about 15 years. We were incredibly famous on Queen Street for one of those years, almost. And we tore shit up, blew things up, breathed fire, and played fetish nights, and were generally naughty. That's it. That's my metal background.
Very cool. My name is Myke Cole. I'm the author of the military fantasy Shadow Ops series that is Control Point, Fortress, Frontier, Breach Zone, and Gemini Cell is the latest one. Think like if Harry Potter went to join the Navy SEALs instead of going to Hogwarts. That's what I do. But I was not always the paragon of American virtue you see before you. I know you can all see my iPhone. In my 20s, I guess my girlfriend tells me I was a Peter Steele lookalike. But I was in a band called Agent X in Buffalo, New York, and we got signed to an EP deal, and they put us on tour opening for major acts to see if the EP could get legs. And we opened for Slick Toxic, Greg Howe, Spread Eagle, Lillian Axe, and our big opener was for the band Jackal. Does anybody remember the Lumberjack song where he plays the solo with a chainsaw? We opened up for them at Impacts in front of 4,000 people, and I thought I was God. And then, of course, Nirvana came out with Smells Like Teen Spirit, and metal went away overnight. Otherwise, I might have a very, very different life. So.
Well, metal only went away in America. It didn't go away in Europe. My name is Peter Orullian. I'm the tour author, epic fantasy. The series is called The Vault of Heaven. First book is The Unremembered. Second book is Trial of Intentions. Later, if we get to it, what's really interesting, I think, about my book is I've taken a lot of the music I know and love and infused it. There's a music magic system in the work that no one's ever... Brandon Sanderson said, and I quote, "I've never seen magic done like this before." So I'm very proud of that. My metal credentials are, I was in a band in Salt Lake City, which is not a thriving metal market. And I moved to the Pacific Northwest when grunge was getting big. There was a lot of industry there. And primarily I went to train with a guy by the name of David Kyle, who trained Jeff Tate from Queensryche, Lane Staley from Alice in Chains, Anna Nancy Wilson from Heart. So he had this pedigree, but he taught a classical voice technique. And I had two tracks in life. One was to come to Broadway and sing Broadway, because I can do all that stuff. And I love that music. And the other was to go into performing hard rock and heavy metal. So I learned the technique, and we got signed to a small label that we opened for Sonata Arctica, Symphony X. We got to open for Dream Theater, which we should just all agree now is the best band in the world. If there's disagreement there, we'll take it up outside after. And as a result, I've gotten to, I get called on every 18, 24 months to pick up and do a European tour with bands who are doing reunions over there. Because metal's really big in Europe, and they have these huge festivals like Wacken, and you do these, there's just tens and tens of thousands of people who just live and breathe this kind of music. And there's no thrill like singing for 20,000 Germans who know every single word you're going to sing. Like, sex doesn't even approach that.
I want to add something about Pete. Pat Rothfuss, who's a really well-known fantasy author, does a charity every year called World Builders, which is a feeder charity for Heifer International. And Pete, we did Acts of Whimsy, we donated Acts of Whimsy, did a thank you song. He basically filked the final countdown by Europe, and he killed it. And if you want to hear Pete singing in a really awesome nerd context, if you Google it on YouTube, Peter Orullian World Builders, you'll find it. That'll sum it all up.
And then you'll end up with all the other nerd ones, because I think we both participate in Pat's thing every year, doing something. I usually do something musical. I did the Ballad of Serenity, but I changed all the lyrics up and made it the Ballad of World Builders. So there's all sorts of connections about nerddom and geekdom and fantasy and metal that we'll get to, and those are examples. We spent a lot of time talking in our intros, didn't we?
That's exactly what I wanted. So help us get an even better picture of your books. What album or band would make a really great soundtrack for for it?
For myself, I do listen to music while I write. I listen to metal pretty much strictly. When I'm writing, music with understandable lyrics is a distraction, so everything I listen to is. Beyond Redemption was written on a strict diet of hypocrisy. That was the band I listened to every single album. I just rotate them over and over and over. The entire book. That's my soundtrack for that book.
This is going to come to no surprise to those of you in the audience who know me, but my books are very, very hard-edge military. There's a lot of magic and fantasy going on in them, so if you want to see a Apache longbow helicopter gunship go up against a hill giant, I'm your guy. Not everybody wants that. But so it should come as absolutely no surprise to people that I would pick not necessarily a particular soundtrack, but a particular song, which is, of course, Metallica's Don't Tread on Me, which is obviously the key song because it's about the American military, which so many of my books are about. But if I had to pick a band, the two bands that I really like for it, because the music, there's metal that's super fast, a la Sepultura, and then there's metal that's almost a marching cadence. My favorite bands for that are Older Prong, like in the 90s, and COC, if people listen to them. Not later COC, not Clean My Wound COC, but earlier COC, which has that kind of grinding, marching Warhammer 40K pace that really gels with my work.
Now, you guys should already be able to answer this for me.
Rob Bedford, ladies and gentlemen.
I said it earlier.
Dream Theater.
Dream Theater.
Of course it's Dream
It's
Theater.
got to be Dream Theater. And I could go on and on about why. Things like, these are Juilliard grads, Berklee School of Music. Like, you guys right here in the city know Berklee School of Music, right? Some of the best jazz musicians in the world come out of that place. So these guys know theory, but then they also bring this intensity of metal. And their songs tell stories. Even just sonically, they move from peaks of speed and sort of pumping rhythms to things that are very sort of intimate, soft, and contrast is, novels can be like that. So definitely them. But it's an impossible question for me to answer because I would have to also, literally in the third book in this series, in the climactic scene that not even my editor has read yet, there's the inspiration for that is a song called Damaged from Seven Dust. You guys know Seven Dust? Absolutely fantastic band. If you're not listening to them, you're barely human. And they just released a new band called Kill the Flaw. Lejean's one of the great rock singers, metal singers working right now. And Morgan Rose, who does their drums, has, I think, the best rock scream. And so when I'm imagining like a soundtrack to my work, the music magic is not sopranos who are singing arias to each other. It's Morgan Rose, who is singing with such intention and intensity, you can't help but be moved. And sometimes that's in a very negative way.
So those of you that are both musicians and writers, what are the differences and similarities between playing and writing music and writing books?
In a band, you're a team. And when you're writing a book, eventually you're a team if you get that far. But in the beginning, it's just you. And when you're in a band, you get to blame everybody else for all the shit that doesn't happen. You get to blame your manager when he loses the A&R rep's card, when they offered to rep you. When you're a writer, it's all your fault. So whether anything happens or not, it's just you. And I fucking love that. It's all my fault. Everything I did, it's like there was no blaming anyone else. And that for me was the biggest difference for writing music.
It's been a really long time since I did composition, but when I did, with the bands I was in, the real similarity I saw is that both in writing and music, you're not that good. You're not that good. And nothing you produce is that good, and so good that you can't throw it away. And what you have to be able to do when you create art of any stripe, be it music, be it writing, be it visual arts, is look at a work that you've sunk thousands of hours into and say, this is not good enough, and I have to chuck it in the trash. And there's a real temptation to, especially now, when you can reach from yourself directly out to an audience, to put things out there and sign your name on them that maybe aren't ready for prime time. And what you don't realize is that when you're an artist, your name is the only thing you have. And that if that reputation becomes that you produce substandard work, even if you produce better work later, you're going to have more of an uphill climb to get back there. So one of the things that every single artistic endeavor I've ever engaged in, including music and including writing, has been that you pour and pour and pour your energy into it. And you also, one of the differences between being a professional and playing around is the ability to look at all of that time and say, this was a learning experience and I have to put it away.
For me, I took the question a little differently. And I've actually very deliberately looked at the constituent parts of composition as it relates to music and writing. And if you think about things like rhythm, you can look at a piece of writing and you can see rhythm in it in terms of the variance that a writer will use with paragraph length or word length or even word choice. I've agonized times with the same word, different words that'll do the same thing, but they're a different length, and the syllables will be different, and it'll change the feeling of the sentence. That's super geeky, but that's what writers do. I suspect my panelists have done the same thing. When you think about meter is about pace, and there's a lot of ways you can manufacture pace. It's not simply having fragment sentences or short paragraphs. And so when you think about meter, like 4/4, 3/4, or 7/8, if you're a Dream Theater fan, you can see in the fiction if the pace is moving, and the pace shouldn't always just be fast. Pace needs to also take into account the classic, scene right before the battle where the king goes through the troops, and they're having a thanatopsis. They're thinking about mortality because they're worried about dying, right? Those kinds of things. Voice, like writers talk a lot about voice, and that's voice, the authorial voice, and it's the voice of the characters. But the same is true for a singer, and in some regards, the singer's voice is his voice or her voice, and it is what it is. But you can color it. There's a band by the name of Trans-Siberian Orchestra. You guys know these guys? All right. Yeah. And I love their music, and they have a song called "Old City Bar" that brings me to tears, and it's basically sung from the perspective of this bum. But in the course of the song, the point of view shifts. And I saw a masterful rendition of this given by the guy in concert. He was actually a Broadway performer. And I met with him after I got to go backstage, and I said, the reason it was masterful is because he changed intonation. He roughed his voice when it was the bum versus when it was the kid versus when it was the bartender. These are the kinds of things that a writer can think about and should think about. And I started a whole series of these where I draw the correlations. I had to stop, though, because I had a book I had to get done for my editor. But if you want to read some of that, it's on my website.
Well, getting to the topic of this panel, I mean, to me, the subjects just seem to make so much sense because there seems to be so much overlap between the science fiction and fantasy and metal subcultures. So what do you think geeks and metalheads have in common?
Geeks and metal, it's a love of something specific and a willingness to put yourself out there. To love it wholeheartedly and not give a shit what everyone else thinks. It's a brotherhood, both metal and geeks. We're united in that, and that's a beautiful thing.
It's so this is actually something I think a lot about, is if you go on and look at someone's Twitter profile nowadays, you have about a 99% chance of the word nerd being somewhere in it. And when people are like, I'm a nerd, like they're outside society by doing that. And I'm like, no, nerddom is so chic right now that you're basically saying, I identify with the dominant mainstream culture. And that's great, because look, we all grew up doing this stuff, and now it went from like fan cons, in a crappy hotel in Westchester to this, right? And that's great, because now I'm surrounded by 15 times as many people who, when I go, that's awesome, they go, yeah, and they understand what I'm talking about. And metal, to me, feels the same way, in that it's a thing that was a fringe thing, a marginal thing. Because I remember when I had hair down in my ass in high school, that meant I was undateable. That meant I was an easy mark for guys that wanted to bully people. It meant that I was unemployable, right? And then for a while, like in the Poison days, like that was super friggin' cool, especially when the IT boom hit and you could have long hair and actually a real job and make real big boy money. In fact, it was sort of expected, at least if you were a Unix guy. And then metal kind of fell out of favor, and now is kind of a retro cool thing again. And that oscillating in and out of pop culture, so you have both the experience of being on the fringe and then being at a stage at New York Comic Con, that is an experience that unites both science fiction and fantasy nerds and metalheads.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's been said. I never get into debates on my Facebook page because I just think that they're not winnable. Like, they're just not winnable. And I think it's bad politics for, I don't mean specifically politics, but for writers to do that. I think it's a temptation you should avoid. That's a personal feeling. But having said that, the only times I get embroiled, and it's been twice, is when I was bold enough to assert that metalheads, and the other time was sports fanatics, are geeks. And geekdom got in my shit.
They do not like that.
They did not want this term co-opted for anybody else who has a passion point about which they're obsessive. And I find that, I mean, to me that's like, you're the tolerant ones? Come on. Like, these people are as bona fide diehard of the things they do. You may not like them, that's fair, but so don't think that that term only belongs to you. So, and then I started thinking about the roots of metal. Metal started in Birmingham with the early Black Sabbath guys, and what was going on there is it was depression, really. There was this rollback after World War II and all of this sort of money, and there was people out of jobs. There was a depressed, and these guys started writing music to assert themselves and to talk about the anger and these feelings they were having. It's very dark if you listen to it. I mean, there's some psychedelic and some blue stuff that was infused to it, but and Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin are fantastic bands. We can debate if they're metal. When you get to Black Sabbath, things change. And the people who like that music at least in the beginning, were the working man. They wore boots that were laced up high. They were working in coal mines. They were doing these kinds of things. And they embraced each other around the dire circumstances and I don't think that's changed. Not that we're all working in coal mines, but I can tell you, when I've been in Europe on tour, I meet someone who doesn't speak my language, and we can listen to a song together, and we immediately bond. We don't have to even have shared the same, like, it's even a little different than fantasy, because you don't have to have shared the same reading experience. You literally just turn on a Led Zeppelin song or a Black Sabbath song, and you're like brothers. It's that fast, and it's so cool to be able to have something that will connect you in the absence of disregarding every other thing about the person. And geekdom's like that too. My editor and I were talking about that as we were walking the floor today. It's so cool to be sort of surrounded by people who share that passion point. Metalheads are the same way. And as evidenced by here today, like, you belong to both tribes.
Well, just to clarify, because I see a lot of people in the audience in their 20s, Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin were music bands that came out before Slipknot. Justice. They're bands from when I was about your age. You're embarrassing me.
I definitely agree with you guys that geekdoms of all kinds have become more mainstream, but historically, science fiction and fantasy and metal have also been dismissed as less artistically serious than other kinds of music or writing. Why do you think that is, and do you think that's changing?
Because people are assholes. Don't even get me started.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not sure that it's changing. I mean, yeah, we're losing the pulp reputation, but mainstream isn't sort of that much higher than pulp. So we are becoming more mainstream, perhaps. I mean, like, now everybody loves Star Wars and everybody loves Star Trek. The bar is higher. I mean, if you've read the old science fiction, you're kind of, really? This got published? Some of it is so bad. And I love it still, but it's really bad. It's not terribly well written, So the bar is higher, but does anyone care beyond that? I mean, it's escapism. Even for me, and I'm like, apparently trying to do this thing, but it's pure escapism for me. And that's all I want out of it. So if it's effective at that, and I think I just wandered off topic, missed your question. I was distracted. He was like flexing and shit, and he threw me off, and I'm like, also, we all got the black t-shirt, blue jeans memo?
Of course.
All right, good.
Of course, that's the metal uniform.
I wasn't nervous.
This is a topic I feel very passionately about. I am a literary progressivist, which is to say that I believe that art is like technology, in that successive generations get it better than the people before us. I know that makes me very unpopular, but when people are like, have you read Isaac Asimov? I'm like, no, man, like there's people writing now that read Isaac Asimov and made better stuff based on Isaac Asimov. Yes, we stand on the shoulders of giants, but our asses are higher off the ground. I don't get a lot, I get a lot of people pissed at me for that, but this is why I don't like, I'm not big into the classics. So, and I think that same kind of thinking ties in with literature, and I'll do this by means of an anecdote. One of my good friends, Dan Polanski, who is an amazing fantasy writer, amazing, one of my favorites. If you're going to read one book by him, it's Lowtown. You won't do yourself wrong, very noir, very, very dark. But he's a real Brooklyn guy, like wears a newsboy cap, unironically. I went to meet him at a bar, and he's sitting in the outside of the bar patio reading the brothers Karamazov, who cares? And I walk over to him and I'm like, hey man. He's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, you're reading the brothers Karamazov? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, in public, where people can see you. And he's like, well, yeah, you know, this is a really good book. And I'm like, you don't really like that book. Nobody likes that book, man. You just want people to see you in public reading this heavy friggin' book. And I'm not fooled by this. And I think that there's a lot of that in literature. And the reality of it is that art is art, and that you view art depending on where you stand. And the books that have had the biggest significance for me personally, outside of just being thrilled and escaping from something, are Joe Abercrombie books. They're dark fantasy novels. So the idea that, folks, if you write something down and you let other people read it, you've created literature. So the idea that something is more literary than something else is a sales category. And I love to put the sales of science fiction and fantasy up against the sales of of literary novels all the time. So I really did mean what I said when I said it before. I think that distinction exists because people are tribal stuff.
I blame higher education for this largely. I was in a writing program at a university, and it was kind of drummed into me that the canon was the canon, and popular novelists suffer by comparison. And I would have these debates all the time with my professors. And so I finally decided what I'm going to do. They had this program at the 500 level called directed readings. And so it's where you get to choose the books you get to read. But you got to choose from the canon. So I did that, and I was left to my own recognizance for an entire quarter to do this. And I went and read a bunch of masters. And side by side, I was reading a bunch of popular novelists. And I disagree a little bit with Myke. I think he's right in probably the 60, 70% case. When I went back to some of these writers, I would hold them up against the best today, and I still think that they trounce many of them. Like, go back and read Bradbury and tell me there's a better fantasy writer than Bradbury. That'd be a fun debate to have. But separate from that, what I did with this professor is I said, because I did a bunch of reading in early sort of horror and early romance, which wasn't romance like Harlequin romance. It was dark. I said, do you realize that Robert Louis Stevenson was the Stephen King of his day? I'm not sure I believe that. He really spent a lot of time. This is my professor voice. He spent a lot of time, agonizing over. No, because he wrote Jekyll and Hyde in 3 days. and his wife didn't like it, so he burned it and rewrote it in 3 days. So, working at a feverish pace, at a book in the canon that sold, like, relative to today, if you do this sort of cost comparison, ginormous bestseller. He was an amazingly rich man off of his writing. He was the Stephen King of his day. And I'd argue in 100, 150 years, people are going to be teaching about Stephen King. One of the great chroniclers of Americana. Like, you may not like him, but I can tell you at a craft level, if you go and deconstruct what King's doing, so many of us writers are plebes by comparison. It's not a secret. Like, I don't know why we get surprised that he keeps having these New York Times bestsellers. It's not a fluke. He's good. It's the same thing with Terry Brooks. He's a friend of mine. And so many of the current sort of fantasy spheres, they don't regard Terry very highly. He's the guy from yesteryear. He's got 35 New York Times bestsellers. Like, this isn't a fluke. Terry's a great writer. It doesn't mean you have to like his work. But that, personally, I can separate that from whether or not I think that the story itself is something I like. And these writers, getting back to the point, these writers that Mike's talking about, and Fletcher's, I use Fletcher like I'm a baseball guy. I'm calling him Fletcher. They're using these techniques the same way that people who are in the literary establishment, who are writing for an audience of 400, are using them. We just happen to sell more copies. And don't get me started on music. Like, I will just say
Please
this.
get started.
if you want to have the debate on musicianship, one anecdote will tell this. I personally know people who study music at the university level and conservatories who have listened to Dream Theater and taken their professors to Dream Theater shows, probably kicking and screaming, and they see these gentlemen play. And they're like, yeah, I'm an idiot.
You know, I want to do one counter to that, which is Robert Louis Stevenson, this guy who wrote Jekyll and Hyde. We all say he was so good, right? How many Comic-Con panels has he been on?
So back to writing for a second. What's the most metal scene you've ever written?
Well, I mean, the entire book is metal. The most metal scene, it'd have to be a sludge metal scene. All right, real quick background. Reality, shaped by the beliefs of the people. Crazy people bend reality better, more effectively. Sociopaths are capable of twisting people, creating worship. So a slaver-type sociopath is someone who basically enslaves people with their need for worship. And there's a scene with a slaver-type sociopath and his hundreds of followers who are incapable of caring for themselves, following in his caravan, and it is absolutely horrendously dirty sludge metal.
Sounds awesome.
That sounds really good. This is a total spoiler, but I don't care. I'm not like a spoiler Nazi. I have a character in my books whose sort of nom de guerre is Scylla, after Scylla and Charybdis, and her ability is to accelerate entropy. So her magic basically causes things to rot, break apart into their components. Age, and she is being chased by a lynch mob, basically, and she's sheltering in a police precinct, and they're trying desperately to get her out the back and into a van before this mob can kill her. And the mob comes rushing to the fence, the chain link fence that rolls it in, and the protagonist, whose perspective you have, his point of view for the chapter, is sort of desperately trying to get her in the van and stop the crowd, and then all of a sudden, no crowd. And she turns around, and there's this basic field of purple slime. That's all that's left of hundreds of people, because she's basically turned around and gone to the dark side, and she's just sort of standing there like this, and everyone is mush. And I did not throw the horns when I wrote that, but I did do a Billy Idol, one lip. Oh, no, most metal scene I had.
The one that comes to mind is the one I referenced before. It's towards the very end of book 3 in the series, which isn't out yet. But woman who has, one of the characters in the book has the gift of this music magic. She's struggling to figure out how to control it, because what happens, one of the mechanics of the magic is I built something called resonance, which in my world is akin to magnetism or gravity. It's a universal governing principle, and as a person who exercises this magic resonates with another person, and one of the principles of resonance in our world as a governing dynamic is that both things resonate, so both things change. So it's one of the consequences of using the magic, and so she's struggling because she doesn't want to use this in a negative way, because that has a consequence for her. But at the end of this, she has kind of no choice, and there's this scene where she is just kicking ass and taking names against this great army, and she ends up completely drenched in blood, and she is just, literally the cadence of the things that she is singing are very much, if you listen, there's a section in the middle of that song, Damaged by Sevendust, where Morgan, there's no guitars going, it's literally bass and drums, and the punch of it is so visceral, and it's so moving, And against that, you have Morgan just doing this thing and saying, God, you're so shameless. God, you're so shameless. And it's so fucking intense. And she's just killing all these people. And I get chills just thinking about this scene. And I got done with that, and I was emotionally drained. So at some point, I'm going to meet Morgan Rose and thank him.
I will say that no scene that any of us could ever write will ever be as metal as, we all know this from Fury Road, the guy tied to the front of a monster truck on a guy wire, playing a BC Rich Mockingbird, I think, that shoots fire. Well done.
BC Rich.
You know, that like, you win metal. Like, there's nothing else. There's no higher.
So present company accepted, who's the most metal author of all time?
See, I thought about this when I saw that question,
and
there's different ways to take this, because there's like the author that listens to the most metal or looks the most metal. If you take it as a, hey, just a pure, I'm going to speak my mind and damn the cost and quite good at it, the first name that came to my mind was Harlan Ellison. If you've ever been around that man, especially in his heyday, like the attitude of metal is Harlan Ellison. But the other name that came to mind was Michael Moorcock. He was at the forefront before grimdark was even a thing, writing grimdark and really dark fiction. And by the way, he's also penned lyrics for metal songs. So.
For me, I'd have to say Mick Farron. I don't know if anyone's heard of him. He wrote like trashy pulp science fiction back in the 70s and 80s. Last Stand of the DNA Cowboys. Took a lot of drugs, hallucinated a lot. Played in a rock band most of his life. And yeah, he's my most metal author.
God. Well, everyone is, I mean, for me, it would have to be the person who's laid waste to the most. And I'm sorry, this is going to sound like a cop-out answer, but it's got to be George R. R. Martin. It's just nothing but like smoking craters, like everything behind him, which is always summarized metal for me. I will say, because I like answering questions I wasn't asked, that the most metal game is Warhammer 40K. And every time I play it, that's like the sound. You cannot, if you're playing anything else in the background while you're playing Warhammer 40K, then like really like killer Cannibal Corpse, nasty metal, you're doing it wrong.
Oh, and I have one backtrack. You asked us a question about convergence. I can't remember the words, but did y'all realize a week ago today there was a Doctor Who episode where Corey Taylor was the voice for Fisher King? Did you guys see this? You know who Corey Taylor is, right?
Yeah, of course.
Stone Sour? Okay. Everybody's madly, who the hell's Corey Taylor?
IMDb.
I think we have some time for audience questions. Yes?
Now, as we established, science fiction and fantasy go well with metal. But some genres of metal tend to go better with the genre than others do, like power metal, progressive metal, folk metal, Viking metal. Why do you think these genres tend to fit better with fiction, with sci-fi, fantasy, vibe than others might?
I think with power metal in particular, progressive metal, the music and even lyrically, they do more storytelling. Bands like Nightwish, you guys like Nightwish? Camelot fans? Yeah, absolutely. The music, it has, especially because they incorporate a lot of keys, but not in like a crazy dumb way, like they actually orchestrated and it's symphonic, it has a storytelling quality to it, an epic quality to it. So with fantasy and science fiction, not all the, and I don't mean epic like epic, you know, I mean epic in the feeling that it evokes. Nightwish in particular, I think they're brilliant at this. Their music, and they do this with their lyrics too. The lyrics in a lot of the metal are actually a lot more considered than you think. I saw the greatest meme in the history of Facebook, and you guys have seen this.
Party Cannon.
No. For me, Party Cannon's off, but for me, the greatest meme was this one that had a Beyonce tune, no offense to the Beyonce fans, next to a Led Zeppelin tune. And it showed the lyrics, and then it showed the writer credits. And the writer credits on the Beyonce tune, there were 9 people it took to write 9 words, because the lyrics were about the same line repeated ad nauseum, including, I think, the lyric that goes, The Led Zeppelin tune was a through-composed song, which means there was no refrain, told an entire story, credited to a single writer.
Stories told by committee. I think to answer your question a different way, it depends on what you get out of metal. I know a lot of people that the appeal of music is associative. So there's this, for example, metal band, Norwegian-based, that only does songs about World War II, like Frozen Monk. Them too, yeah. By the way, Sabaton is it's a word for foot armor. And I always listen to that. I'm like, yeah, Sabaton, that's right. Also Solarette, if you want to talk about foot armor. But like, the point is that the topical nature of that music is what the appeal comes from. And if that's what you are getting out of music, then the answer is kind of easy. There's Viking metal, so that's going to fit better with medieval fantasy. But for me, the appeal of metal is always in the emotion it evokes. And that comes out of the cadence of the music. It comes out of the tonality of the music. It comes out of, but not what the song is about, not what the lyrics are saying, not what the band is standing for, but rather just how I feel when I listen to it. That's why I wasn't kidding when I said don't tread on me, because that is an extremely martial, marching tone, and it's why I like bands like Prong, and even some, believe it or not, older Flotsam and Jetsam. I know that probably doesn't surprise you, but if you listen to it rhythmically, it does similar things to what Prong is doing at the same time. So I think the answer to your question is it depends on what makes music work for you. And I know that totally depends, once again, on where you stand.
And to answer that in a completely even third different way, I think you have to break it up into music metal that's good for reading and metal that's good for writing. I can't listen to prog metal and write at the same time. There must be some part of my brain that those two things share, and I can't do both. So I put on the prog metal, I'm not writing anymore, I'm just listening. Same with some of the Viking metal. I find the themes distracting, and if I'm not writing a Viking book, it's not going to work. But I can listen to prog metal while I'm reading, and I'm perfectly happy. So for writing, I pick based on pace, which is almost always death metal. Actually, I probably just listen to death metal. Yeah, never mind. That's it.
It's kind of, I think it bears a look at even more conversation, because the nature of the music experience is personal. I work for a huge tech company, and big companies are always trying to harness the power of people's music passion, because if they can, they think they can monetize it. And it's unique in that it's nearly impossible to do. And so one answer to your question is also, different people will actually have completely different kinds of metal that work for them for the reading and writing experience. Like, for me, I should just say, I can't listen to music, period, when I write, because music always requires my attention. Even some writers, it's like, well, if it's got no lyrics, I'm okay. I'm not that way. I'm the guy in Safeway doing Shazam to Muzak to figure out what song's going on. If there's music going on, I'm either making it and embarrassing people around me, or I'm listening to it. I can't be distracted from it. So I'm not able to actually write to music at all.
Yeah, I edit in silence, no music while editing, but while I'm writing, I've got a huge sound system left over from my studio days, and it rattles. Like, my wife will be downstairs, like, shut that fucking thing up. Because all the plates are rattling down there. So I've got a monster subwoofer under my desk and no room for my legs, which is great planning.
Robin Hobb writes to Nightwish quite a bit, if you guys know Robin Hobb. And the reason I know that is because I put up a Nightwish rendition of Phantom of the Opera one day on Facebook, because I put a song up every day. I get a message from Robin Hobb that says, hey, you like Nightwish? I said, I love Nightwish. She said, well, I know the Thomas, who's the composer, the keyboard player, really well. They're going to be in town here in a few days. Would you like to go? Yeah. So
I'll go to a metal show with Robin Hobb.
So I went to see Nightwish with Robin Hobb, and we got to go backstage. This is the first show that Floor Jansen, if you guys know Floor, got to sing on. And for her, the Nightwish music, it's got this epic storytelling quality, and there's a lot of the music where it's really guitar, and that's power metal. So it's got that sort of driving cadence against which good battle scenes can be written.
This is the great perk of being a fantasy writer, is that you get to meet, your heroes that you otherwise would never get to. Kevin J. Anderson, he's this science fiction. He's really good friends with Rush, because they I don't know how he came to one of their signings and he was like, I love your music. They're like, we love your books. And so he got to meet them. So don't go into it for the money. Go into it to meet your band heroes.
Yeah.
To meet Nightwish.
If you want to go backstage, be a writer.
That's right. That's the way.
My question is, when you were like school age, like middle school and high school, what was the book that you had to read that you despised? Because everybody has that one.
Well, this supposes that any of us dinosaurs up here remember high school. All right, fair enough.
I read in college, I took a class where I had to read, I don't remember the writers, but I had to read a bunch of metafiction. What a bunch of horseshit that is. I mean, seriously, we would do these round, I'm sorry if I offended people, but they do this horseshoe and we go around and we talk and I just said, look, that was the worst thing I've ever read. His response was, that's fantastic. He said, you only get to say that once.
Who wrote Chrysalids? Oh, I hated that book. Fuck, I hated that book.
I'm going to punt because I don't hate books. This is the weird thing for me, is that, the books I like more than others, but there's never been a painful reading experience for me. I will not bash a book I haven't read. So I read 50 Shades of Grey, cover to cover. And I like that less than almost any other book I'd ever read. But I was in awe of this thing that is so far outside my experience. Look, ultimately, why do I write? I write because if you couldn't tell, I'm super social. And what I want to do is communicate with everybody in the world all the time. And when I'm writing, I'm seeing someone who's utterly unlike me, who doesn't know me, their lens perspective on the world. And that to me is a really fascinating thing. So I didn't like 50 Shades of Grey as much, but I would never unread it. You know what I mean? It wasn't painful for me to read. So I'm sorry if that's a duck on the question.
If you were any subgenre of metal, what would it be? Like power metal?
Surprise, I'd be death metal. That was crazy. Actually, them too. I mean, yeah, I use death metal as my pacing. So it starts fast, and it goes fast, and it gets faster. And then somebody screams, and there's a guitar solo, and then boom, it's over.
What subgenre is Anthrax around the time of Paranoia and Armored Saint around the time of Symbol of Salvation? So I'm getting mixed signals from the audience here. Is it thrash? Yeah? Okay, then that's what I would be.
I think you can answer this for me. No? That's a close number 2 to progressive metal.
Yeah.
And that's Dream Theater. It's Fate's Warning. You guys know Fate's Warning?
King Diamond. You like King Diamond?
I do like King Diamond. Yeah. Queensryche is a progressive metal band. Now they went through a middle bunch of crappy years, and this has mostly to do with, Jeff trying to evolve in a way that's not interesting to a lot of people. But their new album, by the way, if you don't know, with Todd LaTorre, is actually really very good. It just released, I think in the last week or so. So.
Yes.
This is more of a request than a question. You guys give us your badass
Did Sam Sykes hire you to? No.
Want to take this one first?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go. All right. So I sang backing vocals because I cannot sing at all. And my job, the bass player could sing really well. He did all the pretty backing vocals, and my job was to do all the, not really guttural, we weren't that kind of bad, but the throat burger vocals.
The Cookie Monster.
I'm trying not to blow anything up.
Next question.
Anywhere?
I know you guys discussed a lot, like, we've heard a lot about, like, classical musicians and metal, stuff like that, but do you guys follow, like, the newer generations of metal? Like, what is it, feeling about some of the new stuff, if you're listening to any of it, following any of it?
Yeah, I listen to tons of new stuff. I will say that the one thing, my co-panelist notwithstanding, I don't have a lot of affinity for the growling, the what I call Cookie Monster vocals. I don't find them to be musical. Now, I appreciate that there's a technique there that they learn and they get good at, but I get disappointed all the time. I read Blabbermouth religiously, and I read all the stuff, and every time there's a new release, I get really excited by the music, even though the band names are super silly. And then some guy comes on and just starts doing Cookie Monster, and I'm like, for me, it ruins the. And doesn't mean that there can't be a lot of rawness. There should be in the music, but so for me, trend-wise, there's a lot of that, and a lot of it's in death metal, but it's not only in death metal. There's a lot of black metal. There's a lot of doom metal that do the same thing, and I'm not a big fan of that. But I listen like everything that comes out on Blabbermouth. There's a couple other places I follow. So I'm really interested in new music all the time. There's a band, by the way, didn't quite get signed, by the name of Chiaroscuro. They've got some stuff on YouTube you should check out. Their singer actually is now teaching at the conservatory. He's absolutely fantastic. Like, so I'm actually a big fan of the guys who don't quite make it, but are talented enough that the industry just is hashing through them.
People are already tweeting that growl. Like, I'm getting Twitter notifications. This is the thing, guys. This is the thing. This is why you have to be careful on Comic-Con panels, because the internet is forever.
It is forever, that's right.
Yeah, I think there's different levels of Cookie Monster vocals. You can't lump all Cookie Monster vocals into just Cookie Monsters. I mean, there's a, and then there's discernible notes and vocal and words where you can actually, even though the guy's screaming himself to just bloody throat bits, you can still understand what's being said. That's my preference. I lean in that direction. So anything with that, not so much the, because that, I mean,
So the silverback gorilla at peace.
yeah.
Gorilla grooming sound.
Yes.
Wondering, since especially Peter was talking about the move from conservatory, and as someone who was actually brought up with being told how comics metal and all these things are low, and you shouldn't like them, and here's some your classical training and now it's non-metal genres or non-metal artists that also inspire your writing and your storytelling.
Chip Davis. You guys know Chip Davis from Mannheim Steamroller? He's a national treasure. He's one of our great, great American composers. And he doesn't, most of their songs don't even have vocals.
I've been listening, so when I write, I can't have lyrics, because when there's words, I need to interpret them. My brain starts to focus on the conversation. So I write to a lot of classical music, and I write to a lot of movie and video game soundtracks. And I have lately been on a classical music kick. Prokofiev, who did he's a Russian composer who did scores for the Sergei Eisenstein movies. These are very metal. They're about Teutonic knights fighting, in the Middle Ages, fighting against the Russians. And also there's a Fantasia variation from the soundtrack for 50 Shades of Grey, which is incredibly enchanting and transporting. And what's so amazing to me about this experience is, as I'm writing, I'm thinking, wow, man, this is the stuff my dad likes. So it's mildly terrifying, but it's really cool to be able to come around to appreciating stuff that I thought was old school when I was younger.
Yeah.
Prokofiev, his soundtrack to the opera he did, that they also made
Lieutenant Cleage or some Russian name, yeah.
the opera. I sang it 2 years ago with the orchestra, and while I'm singing it, I'm thinking, this is like a heavy metal song.
Did you sing it like?
As it feels like that we watch the film and we're.
I just had a brainstorm. We should make you guys do a big Cookie Monster
Oh,
screen.
yeah. I like it.
Wouldn't that be epic? I'll video. Are you willing?
Oh,
You have to do it. I'm gonna count to 5.
I'm in hell.
Get yourselves ready, and you're gonna do the best Cookie Monster scream ever. Ready? 1. We'll do it on 3. 1, 2, 3. That's fantastic. The internet loves you.
So to throw in real quick, I'm with Mike on the classical music. I've sort of cherry-picked all of the darkest, most gothic classical music I can find. Like some of the whole Planet Suite stuff, Mars, God of War, awesome. Like that is, it's heavy metal, but earlier. It's weighty brass. So yeah, if it's not death metal, then I'm listening to classical stuff.
The other things I'd add for me is I'm a big fan of the guys like Sinatra and Tony Bennett. That whole era of music I love. And I'm also a big jazz fan. In fact, my editor and I are going to go to a jazz club while we're here. And not just some of the recent guys, but the early ones, Miles Davis, Cole Porter.
And this is actually a really good point. So one of the great misfortunes of the world is that America has been an art exporter for basically our nation's history, to the exclusion of other nations. Like if you go, like Canada has to have special laws to play Canadian bands, because if they don't, it'll just be the US artists 24/7. And the problem with that is when you're an American, you miss a lot of great music that's coming from around the world. And so, for example, the last movie soundtrack that I know I'm going to buy is Persian music sung in Farsi, which is the soundtrack to A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which is this really cool Iranian vampire independent film that was shot in California. So one of the things I really would encourage people to do, if you're looking for cool music, don't limit yourself to the English language, and don't limit yourself to American artists. Make sure, and nowadays with the internet, you have no excuse. The entire world is available at the touch of a button. So please make sure you're checking out other stuff, because there's a lot of great stuff out there, including a lot of great Canadian bands, like I Mother Earth, that you won't hear about if you just stay inside the U.S. bubble, which is easy to do. Sure.
Scandinavia is producing some of the best metal on the planet. The good thing is the internet's global, so it's easy to get that stuff.
That being said, what is the most metal place on Earth? Should I move there?
I know.
Hey, if you exude enough metal, it's wherever you are.
Oh. It's a good question.
Yeah.
I know where it isn't. It's not Brampton, Ontario.
It's Vienna, Austria, because that is where in 1683, under siege from the Ottoman Turks, the relief army of Poland charged through and broke their lines and liberated the city. And back then, the Knights of Poland all bolted 15-foot wings onto their backs. So thousands, you can Google this and see pictures of it, thousands of angels like storming over, to Sepultura, storming over the hill and like cracking the Ottoman lines. So it's Vienna, and you should absolutely live there. It's one of the great cities on earth.
The thing I'd add is, like, for real, if you want to live in a country that, like, just, metal's more pervasive, people love it, there's always a show to see, there's always a festival, it's either it's either Greece or Germany.
Any more questions? Yes.
You mentioned earlier that you kind of have two roads where you go down, either Broadway or metal. Have you ever thought of combining those with your fantasy fiction and giving us all three?
So, yes. I'm doing a concept album that's set in the universe of my series right now. It's very much in the sort of Dream Theater, Queensryche area, because that's the way I train. That's my voice. It's why I begged off on the growl thing. I'll rough my voice for effect sometimes, but I don't do Cookie Monster because it's actually not good for the voice. Most of those cats end up with nodules, and then they have to have surgery. So I'm going to do that. There's tons of the actual music and stuff and theory in my book that I've woven in. Is that the question? Yeah. Yeah, no, and I'm not the only one that's done that. And there's others have taken their fiction worlds and created musicscapes to them. But I'm going to do it in a much more heavy way than some of the others that have been less heavy. We'll just say that.
My Broadway career was pretty abortive. Hasn't really gone very far.
Back row?
I guess my question is, how do you feel about the literature crossover into metal? Blind Guardian, for example, does a lot of work that is about a novel that they've read. Is that something? Have you ever listened to music and then gone and read the book? And how would you feel if your books became, a theme for a metal album?
I don't know how old everybody in the audience is. I'm 41, and I remember when it wasn't cool to be smart. It is now, thank God. But I remember when knowing stuff was like a social impediment to you, and you had to keep it quiet. And I think one of the reasons we're seeing what you're describing is people have figured out, oh, wait, being stupid is stupid. We shouldn't do that. Science is cool, and history is cool, and we want to talk about these things. And I, for one, am super gratified and think that's really cool to see it. And I probably speak for all of us here. If anyone made a metal song about anything remotely related to me, my work, anything, I would lose it and float around the city for the rest of my natural life. So if you're an ACID metal artist out there who's inspired by my work and you're working on and you're worried about whether or not I'll be upset, the answer is no, I won't. Please go ahead.
I've never come to fiction as a result of hearing. I know Blind Guardian and others have taken a lot of Middle Earth stuff and done it. For me, that stuff has to be done really well, or it comes off really cheesy. And frankly, I think most of it is, to be honest with you. I will say, though, I did a panel like this in Seattle that had Steve Erickson on it. And Steve turned to me and says, I have no idea why I'm on this panel. And the reason he was on the panel, and Steve's smart, he can talk about anything, and he makes everybody smarter around him. But the reason he was on the panel is someone had done that. They had done a song from his Malazan world. And so they figured that qualified him to be on the panel. But the thing is what's funny is we took the topic and we gravitated into some other areas, and we started talking about some of the things we hit on here, like the working man and the roots of it, and how those things can be common threads for people who like this kind of music and use it as a standard, and they fly those colors in the same way that people who show up here for, all the other kinds of media that we're here for. And that's a really interesting conversation to have. We could do a whole panel just on that.
I'm very much influenced by the music I listen to. Lines from songs have made it into books, changed, but have sort of like influenced characters. So if I wrote a book that was kind of ripping on a song that I listened to, and then a band came along and wrote a song about my book ripping off a song, I think we could have something kind of recursive there. I like it.
Which album do you feel is most influenced your life?
Images and Words by Dream Theater.
That was quick.
No, I picked up that album. It was their second album, new singer, James LaBrie, classically trained vocalist, and I went driving around the city listening to it. And I had this bittersweet moment of, this is probably the greatest rock vocalist that has ever lived. And because I was an inspiring vocalist, I'm like, I should quit because I can't do that. And seriously, it was like, it was a true, but for me, it was so bittersweet. I thought I should give up. I didn't. I moved and trained with David and learned how to do what he does. But everything on that album, like if you ever listen to it, like just go hit YouTube or whatever, the colors all the way through. You were talking about some of the, music that's got this beat that when I listened to Pull Me Under, I heard siege engines. And then there's other things in there that are so delicate, like your heart beats. So that just moved me. That album's just, for me, was a watershed moment.
Iron Maiden, Peace of Mind.
Great album.
Grade 7, I think I first heard that. Vinyl. I only bought it. I'd never heard of the band. I only bought it because the cover was so cool. And I took it home and I put it on the record player. And I was like, it was so heavy, so unlike anything I'd ever heard before. I took the record off and was like, oh, that's too heavy. That's too much. Then, a couple of days later, it's like, whoa, no, it's too much. And I swear, it took me weeks to actually listen to the whole thing. And from then on, it's just gone downhill from there. Put that album.
Justice, record players are what we used to use to listen to records. Records are like CDs, but they're about 20 times the size. So you can also use them as Frisbees, and people often do. For me, it was, and this is embarrassing, but after the audience growl, like, who cares, right? Is the soundtrack for the Rankin Bass animated Lord of the Rings. You know, that guy singing like he just sucked down a helium balloon. The road goes ever. You know, like I almost picture him like he's doing this with his throat. And then, so that's embarrassing enough, right? But then if that wasn't bad enough to have that secret shame, then South Park did that episode with the gerbil or hamster. You guys remember? And it's all like these Lemmiwinks, Mr. Lemmiwinks, yeah. So because Justice is hanging with us today, I'm not going to go into detail about that show, but it's all parodying that animated Rankin Bass, including the songs. So not only did I get to feel ridiculous when it inspired me, because that song was the soundtrack of my nascent nerddom, but I got to have it like parodied by Parker and Stone in South Park. So.
By the way, this is apropos of nothing, but there's someone at the con I saw as I was walking here wearing a Hanson t-shirt. I'm pretty sure ironically. But if you find, I didn't have time, if you find him, will you take a picture and send it to me?
Time for a couple more. Yeah.
When you read, do you listen to music? So you associate that music after. Like when you hear it, you think about that book.
I think I answered this. I can't, music requires my attention, and I mean that in a snobbish way, but I can't do other things.
I'm going to pass because we actually are out of
Actually,
time. If you have one answer.
Quick answer? No.
Yeah, I don't listen to music when I read.
Well, thank you guys, and please turn it up to 11 for our awesome panel.
We're going to be signing books over at the Word Bookstore Bookshop if you guys want to come. And also, I have sticker bookplates, so if you don't have one of my books, I'll happily sign it.